What if the mother was never seen in labor because she never went into labor? It sounds absurd, doesn't it? That one of the most famous women in the world, a duchess no less, could have pulled off an illusion of pregnancy while the world watched. But what if that illusion wasn't just a tabloid fever dream? What if whispers inside palace corridors were far more damning than anything the press has dared to print? Because just days ago, a man who's delivered multiple royal heirs walked calmly into a restricted chamber at Clarence House and said 5 devastating words that made King Charles visibly pale. There are no medical records. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This wasn't just a rogue staffer, a jilted friend, or a gossip columnist. This was the obstetrician who should have been on call for Meghan Markle's labor. And for the first time since the birth of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor in 2019, he publicly broke ranks. Not with a press release, not on social media, but directly to the king himself. And here's the question no one seems brave enough to ask. What if the pregnancy never happened the way we were told? What if Meghan Markle's carefully choreographed, camera-ready bump was only part of a larger deception? That's the story the palace is now scrambling to piece together. And what we've uncovered in this investigation might just send shockwaves through the entire House of Windsor. Let's go back. It all began with a question, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of doubt that first stirred inside royal insiders during Meghan's final trimester. Why were protocols being ignored? Why were midwives kept away? Why was the trusted royal obstetrician, who had served the monarchy for decades, suddenly removed from the delivery list? Because here's how it's supposed to work. For every royal birth, there's a detailed plan in place. A medical chain of command, a specific hospital, a visible, well-documented delivery that typically ends in the iconic Lindo wing photo op. The world remembers the images. Diana glowing as she held William, Kate radiant and composed, cradling George, Charlotte, then Louis. But Meghan? There was no hospital press queue, no public photo on hospital steps, no signed birth certificate released with standard protocol timing, no official confirmation of hospital stay. In fact, there was no proof at all, aside from a slick, filtered Instagram image, suggesting she had ever been inside any delivery ward on British soil. And yet, she was congratulated, applauded, celebrated. Until now. Because something has shifted. The conversation has turned. And deep inside royal archives, questions once brushed aside are now being asked aloud. Hard questions. Dangerous ones. How do you crown a grandchild if you're no longer certain he was born into the bloodline? It's the nightmare scenario for any monarch, especially one trying to stabilize a fractured family and a country skeptical of its institutions. But King Charles is no fool. For years, he avoided the topic, declined to comment, gave the benefit of the doubt, even when staffers quietly voiced concerns, even when aides hesitated before using the word mother in reference to Meghan, even when security staff noticed strange travel patterns around her alleged due date. He let it go. But now it's different. Because a respected obstetrician finally stepped forward and admitted, I was never called. I was told to prepare as usual, and then never heard from them again. That's not just strange. That's an explosive omission. This man, let's call him Dr. R for now, has been the go-to consultant for royal pregnancies stretching back to the late 80s. He signed more birth certificates than any other OB in the United Kingdom's royal registry. He was present for both of Kate Middleton's first 2 deliveries. He worked under the Queen's own gynecological advisor. And when Harry and Meghan announced they were expecting, he naturally expected a call. It never came. Instead, a palace assistant relayed that Meghan had chosen a different path, one that was private, spiritual, and American-led, which was code, many believe, for outside the system entirely. But what does that mean? Did she fly back to California? Was a private team brought into Frogmore Cottage? Were NDAs handed out like party favors? The palace has never confirmed. But we have reason to believe that multiple external medical staff were quietly flown in from the U.S. and housed in off-the-books properties near Windsor. People who had no legal registration to practice medicine in the U.K. People who've since vanished from public view. And that's just the beginning. Because behind closed doors, aides and advisors began collecting inconsistencies. One assistant noted how Meghan's bump seemed to change shape radically between morning and afternoon engagements. Another described the unusual stiffness of the baby in early photo ops. Even more bizarre, a senior aide reportedly caught a glimpse of Meghan in her dressing room. Completely flat-stomached just days before the official due date. Still think this sounds outlandish? Then answer this. Why are there no hospital admission records for Meghan on the date of Archie's birth? None under her real name, none under any known alias. St. Mary's has no such record. Neither does the Portland, the private clinic many suspected was used as an alternative. And private security companies that usually swarm for royal births? Not a single confirmed booking. Something was off. And people were beginning to talk. Then came the doll theory. Yes, the internet may have taken it to extremes, but digital sleuths, body language experts, even former royal correspondents started questioning the strange mechanics of Archie's earliest public appearances. In one video, Meghan bends over and the baby appears rigid, stiff, immobile. In another, the blanket slips slightly, and viewers claim to see plastic-like skin. Was it a reborn doll? Was it just bad lighting? The palace refused to comment, but never offered a correction. Then came the missing nurse. A woman reportedly hired as a temporary nanny for Archie vanished just weeks after her contract ended. She had no digital footprint, no forwarding address. Her own friends claimed she ghosted them. Her bank accounts were emptied and closed. Some say she was paid off. Others say she was silenced. And what about King Charles? He stayed quiet. Until now. According to multiple sources close to Clarence House, Charles recently held a private audience with Dr. R, the very man who should have overseen Meghan's delivery. The meeting was discreet. No press, no statement. But someone close to the discussion claims Charles asked one simple question. Was she ever on your roster? And Dr. R reportedly replied, no, she was never booked, never briefed, never seen. You could hear a pin drop. Charles, by protocol, is the guardian of royal legitimacy. He knows that titles, succession rights, even the crown itself could be threatened by deceit in the royal bloodline. And now he was staring at the possibility that Archie and Lilibet might be biologically undocumented. What comes next? We've only scratched the surface. Because this story isn't about one woman or one pregnancy. It's about an entire institution potentially caught in a global deception. A deception that, if proven true, could alter the royal line forever. And the next chapter? That begins not in the palace, but in the logs of a private charter plane, secretly rerouted from LAX to Farnborough just weeks before Meghan's due date. And the person on board was no doctor. She was someone far more dangerous. Under what circumstances does a royal pregnancy warrant a charter jet from Los Angeles? And why was the passenger list sealed? Because that's exactly what happened. Weeks before the supposed birth of Archie, a Gulfstream 4 departed Van Nuys Airport in California under extreme discretion. No press, no paparazzi, no official record of Meghan Markle being on board. But that flight landed at Farnborough Airport in the UK, a known entry point for high-profile, undisclosed royal movement. And while the aircraft manifest was blocked from public release, an insider has now revealed that the name listed in the medical section wasn't Meghan. It was a woman simply identified as medical transfer, confidential, Carrier X. Carrier, not guest, not duchess, not even private citizen. So who was she? And why was this unnamed woman, hidden from the world, flown in under intense secrecy to a royal-adjacent property just days before Meghan's due date? Let's dig in, because the answer might hold the key to a conspiracy far more disturbing than anyone expected. According to multiple aviation sources familiar with discreet diplomatic transports, the charter wasn't booked through traditional royal channels. It was paid for by a private Delaware-based LLC, one that had previously been linked to high-level Hollywood clientele and, interestingly, several former associates of Meghan's entertainment legal team. That alone raised red flags. The royals don't hide their travel logistics, not when it comes to something as symbolic and sacred as a royal birth. Now imagine this. Behind the polished PR statements, behind the baby showers and bump cradles, there's a shadow network of logistics, shuttling someone not for glamour, but for biological necessity. Could this have been the surrogate? Because here's where things get even murkier. A source tied to ground staff at Farnborough claimed that the woman who exited that plane was not alone. She was accompanied by 2 medical professionals, one of whom carried a cooler. Not a suitcase. A cooler. Let that sink in. What's normally transported in coolers during medical flights? Placental tissue, umbilical cords, in rare cases, embryos. No one is suggesting a science fiction plot here. But let's not pretend this kind of operation is outlandish in today's hyper-managed celebrity world. Celebrities go to incredible lengths to control birth narratives. But for a royal, the stakes are much higher. There's lineage, titles, constitutional authority, all hinging on proof of birth. So why was a woman referred to as Carrier X flown in the dead of night, only to vanish into an off-grid private estate near Windsor? And more importantly, why was no medical facility notified? Normally, any surrogate delivering a royal baby, if officially sanctioned, would go through an extensive legal and medical vetting process. There would be court filings, birth certification procedures, everything overseen by the Crown's legal counsel and the Home Office. Yet not one document exists in the public domain confirming the presence or identity of this woman. Even more stunning, the day after that plane landed, Meghan was photographed in London wearing a tight-fitting coat. No bump, no explanation. That same week, palace aides were instructed to clear a portion of Frogmore Cottage for postnatal care. But security around the estate was tighter than ever. No press, no hospital vans, no midwives seen entering or exiting. Just a single courier van, arriving at 4:37 a.m. The driver, when later interviewed anonymously, confessed to delivering a package labeled Neonatal Nutritional Formula, 48-hour temp controlled. Not uncommon, he said, but strange for a royal household with access to top-tier on-site nutrition. So who was the formula for? And here's the kicker. According to a former palace staffer, who has since been placed on a paid leave of absence after requesting a legal waiver, a call came into the palace switchboard at 2:12 a.m. that same day. The caller identified themselves only as Gillian, with an American accent, and asked to confirm the arrival time of the postnatal kit. The call lasted 23 seconds and was flagged by the operator as unusually precise for a non-official contact. The same name, Gillian, appears again in a deleted WhatsApp message recovered from a staff member's cloud backup. Gillian says the milk must stay cold. No press. No contact. This is not a drill. Not a drill? What was this household preparing for? Let's pivot. Because just days later, Meghan and Harry announced Archie's birth. No hospital name. No time of delivery. No official Lindo wing photo. Just a casual appearance in St. George's Hall, where the couple stood beside what appeared to be a heavily swaddled infant. A baby whose features were nearly invisible, whose arms and legs never moved, whose eyes never opened. A baby, as some commentators said, almost too still. Now pause. Ask yourself, when has a royal child ever been presented like that? Even in moments of intense media scrutiny, the royal family knows the importance of transparency. William and Kate walked out of the hospital, posed for cameras, even answered questions. So why was this birth, this baby, this entire process so clouded in fog? Because it wasn't just fog. It was smokescreen. And it worked. Until now. Because that woman, Carrier X, she didn't disappear forever. No. She resurfaced briefly in a California legal dispute over a non-disclosure clause involving gestational services. The court sealed the details, but one footnote mentioned a foreign national client, whose case required dual jurisdictional confidentiality. Guess who was residing in Montecito at the time? And here's where the emotional stakes deepen. According to an anonymous friend of Meghan's former yoga instructor, there were whispers that Meghan was terrified of giving birth, that she wanted everything on her own terms, and that no one was allowed to question her if she chose another route. But that wasn't just about safety. It was about control. Control of the narrative. Control of the optics. Control of how the world saw the first biracial royal baby. So here's the twist. What if Meghan never intended to deceive anyone about Archie's existence, but rather to control the method of his arrival so completely that no one could ever say otherwise? What if, in doing so, she broke every royal protocol, not out of malice, but out of obsession with perfection? What if, to preserve the image, the fairy tale, the flawless aesthetic, she erased the truth. And what happens now? Because King Charles has reportedly reopened the investigation. Internal documents suggest that DNA verification may be requested, not just for succession clarity, but for legal transparency surrounding Archie's and Lilibet's titles, inheritances, and place within the royal order of precedence. Can you imagine what happens if that request is denied? We're no longer in rumor territory. We're entering constitutional crisis. And while the world may debate bump sizes and baby cries, the monarchy is preparing for a battle over bloodlines. A battle that may soon involve subpoenas, because a hidden document has just come to light. A document that wasn't meant to be seen by anyone outside of Meghan's legal team. A document titled, Alternative Birth Plan, Surrogacy Protocol, Contingency Scenario 3B. It's dated April 25, 2019, 10 days before Archie's birth. And it contains one name, the very same alias used on that Gulfstream manifest. What if the very doctor who should have delivered the royal baby was actively kept away? What would it mean if the palace's own trusted obstetrician, sworn to centuries of protocol, was sidelined, silenced, and ultimately replaced by a medical phantom team that left no trace? Because that's exactly what happened to Dr. R, the man who had served under 3 monarchs, the man who delivered Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, the man who had prepared for Meghan Markle's delivery months in advance, only to be ghosted, dismissed, and left in the dark. And now he's finally talking, not to the press, not to tabloids, but in a sealed, off-record meeting with King Charles himself, where his words were transcribed, analyzed, and immediately flagged as a matter of succession integrity. This isn't speculation anymore. This is crisis mode. But let's rewind the tape, because Dr. R's story is not only revealing, it's chilling. 6 months before Archie's birth, Dr. R was notified, via formal royal correspondence, that he would once again be overseeing a royal delivery. This time, for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, whose baby would mark a new milestone. The first biracial child born into the direct line of succession. Everything seemed normal. He was looped into preliminary medical briefings. He received security clearance updates for St. Mary's. He even approved a modified delivery plan accounting for Meghan's heightened privacy preferences. But then, silence. Weeks passed. No follow-ups. No briefings. No appointments. And then came the most bizarre detail of all. His official royal calendar was cleared for the entire week surrounding May 6, 2019, Archie's supposed birth date. Yet he was never told why. That's right. The very man who should have been stationed outside a delivery room at the Lindo wing was instead sent home, under silent orders. And when he inquired, gently, through the proper palace channels, he was met with vague language like, "She has chosen a more spiritual route. There will be no need for your services this time. She's taken the California approach." California approach? That phrase stuck with him. Haunted him, actually. Because it wasn't just ambiguous, it was deliberately misleading. It implied a different system. One that avoided UK jurisdiction. One that circumvented protocol. Now let's pause. Do you understand the gravity of that? We're not talking about a celebrity ducking paparazzi. We're talking about a senior royal, 7th in line to the throne, choosing to reject the monarchy's centuries-old medical infrastructure, and doing so without informing the sovereign, the prime minister, or the crown medical officer. And Dr. R wasn't the only one kept out. 2 midwives trained in royal postpartum care were also pulled off rotation without explanation. A neonatal consultant, stationed at St. Mary's, was reassigned to a charity conference in Cornwall on the day of Archie's reported birth. Not one of these professionals was present. Not one has spoken on record. And here's where it gets more surreal. Because Dr. R, sensing something deeply off, began quietly documenting everything. Every email, every canceled meeting, every whispered corridor conversation that seemed to trail off when he entered the room. He even wrote a private journal entry on May 5, 2019, the night before Archie's supposed arrival. "I have delivered heirs and spares. But tomorrow, I deliver nothing. Because I've been told to vanish. This is unprecedented, unnatural, and in my bones, I feel it is wrong." Those words were never meant to be public, but someone leaked them. And when King Charles read them in a confidential report compiled this past year, Reportedly, after being pressured by legal advisors concerned about title legitimacy, he called for Dr. R to meet him in person. What was said in that room? One insider claims Charles asked, "Was Meghan ever on any list? Was there ever a patient file?" Dr. R's answer? No. There were no consultations, no ultrasounds, no records in our system. I've never seen a pregnancy go so undocumented, especially one meant to belong to the future of the monarchy. Let that sink in. He never saw her. Not in clinic, not in briefing, not in ultrasound reports, not in private consultations, not in prenatal exams. Not once. A woman allegedly 9 months pregnant with the king's grandchild never appeared in front of his medical team. That's not just suspicious. That's unprecedented. Every royal woman, from the Queen to Princess and to Kate, followed meticulous documentation protocols, blood tests, viability scans, internal records signed by senior medical staff, all archived, all reviewed, all logged for state record. So why didn't Meghan? Why was she allowed, encouraged, even, to bypass the system? This brings us to the Hollywood medical team. Because according to a palace secretary, it was during a crisis briefing in late April 2019 that a hush-hush memo was circulated. Per the Duchess's request, medical supervision will be handled by an externally contracted team. Credentials have been verified by her private counsel. The royal household will not oversee birth procedures. Not oversee, not verify, not confirm. Are we to believe that a royal baby can be born off the books without a royal doctor present, simply because the mother decided so? And here's where the contradictions become undeniable. The official palace birth announcement for Archie didn't include standard medical acknowledgments. No mention of delivery time, no acknowledgement of hospital name, and even more bizarre, no witness signatures. Compare that with Princess Charlotte's announcement. Time of birth, listed. Location, St. Mary's Hospital. Medical personnel, named. Witnesses, signed. That's protocol. That's monarchy. That's what safeguards succession. But with Archie, nothing. It's as if the entire process happened in a vacuum. And it gets worse. Because Dr. R, during his recent meeting with King Charles, revealed that a mysterious document surfaced in early 2020, a document purporting to be Meghan's prenatal care file. But when his name was listed as the attending physician, he knew something was deeply wrong. He had never written it, never signed it, and upon closer inspection, the signature was a forgery. Let that settle for a moment. Someone tried to backdate medical records and forge the name of a royal obstetrician to patch over inconsistencies. Someone inside the system. Someone who had access to templates, letterheads, and credentials. That's not paranoia. That's a cover-up. And Dr. R, stunned, immediately requested an internal audit of medical files submitted under Meghan's name. But before it could be completed, the system was locked, archived, reclassified, and Dr. R was given early retirement. Now ask yourself, would the palace go to these lengths if everything was legitimate? Would a man with 30 years of royal service, a man knighted for his loyalty, be abruptly dismissed after asking basic questions? And the emotional undercurrent here is devastating. Because Dr. R was proud of his role. He believed in the monarchy. He believed in continuity. And now, he's left questioning whether he unintentionally became part of a lie. A lie that, if fully exposed, could delegitimize not just 2 children's titles, but the credibility of the entire House of Windsor. So what comes next? A deeper audit of medical records? A push for DNA? An open confrontation between King Charles and his youngest son? Because there's one more name we haven't mentioned. A midwife, once assigned to Meghan for consultation, who mysteriously disappeared from her post in February 2019. She never returned. Her personnel file now reads, transferred to confidential division, location unlisted. And just weeks ago, she was seen entering a private legal office in South Kensington, carrying a single folder marked MS, Contingency A. Why would a midwife be transferred to a confidential division and then disappear? And what exactly was inside the folder labeled MS, Contingency A? The initials weren't subtle. MS was quickly interpreted by royal insiders as Meghan Sussex. But it was the second part, Contingency A, that sent shockwaves through the few who knew how royal medical protocols worked. Because in palace jargon, a contingency refers to a backup plan for succession-sensitive scenarios, stillbirth, emergency surgery, or, most alarmingly, illegitimate claims of lineage. So why was Meghan Markle, at the height of her pregnancy, being referenced in such a file? And who created it? That brings us back to the missing midwife. Her name? For legal reasons, let's call her Ella. Ella was one of the palace's most trusted maternal care specialists. She'd assisted Princess Eugenie during her first pregnancy and had previously shadowed senior NHS doctors during royal births. In late 2018, Ella was quietly assigned to Meghan. The role was unusual. Instead of regular check-ins, she was given limited access, permitted to communicate through Meghan's assistant, and only allowed physical contact if explicitly summoned. She was never summoned. Ella reportedly only saw Meghan in person once, during a brief hallway interaction at Kensington Palace. She told a colleague afterwards, "Something's wrong. She walks like there's no weight. Her back has no tension. It doesn't feel like a third trimester." That might sound speculative. But to a trained midwife, these aren't throwaway observations. They're physical indicators of pregnancy, or the lack thereof. And within a week of making those remarks, Ella was reassigned. No explanation, no debrief, no closure. Her office was cleared, her communications encrypted, her records sealed under Section 14, privileged medical assignments. And for months, no one saw her again, until that folder appeared, because a legal assistant at Kensington, speaking anonymously under threat of dismissal, saw Ella hand-deliver a folder to a private legal team representing the sovereign. Inside, they claim, was a signed affidavit, a personal statement detailing what Ella saw and what she didn't. And at the center of that statement, a single, devastating sentence. "In my professional opinion, the subject did not exhibit any of the physical characteristics consistent with a woman in her final month of pregnancy." If that statement is authenticated, the monarchy is facing a full-blown legitimacy crisis. But it gets even more bizarre. Because there's another layer to Ella's story, one involving an anonymous package sent to her home just weeks before she disappeared from public view. The package contained a single item, a copy of the official royal birth manual, with one passage underlined in red ink. "Any deviation from standard medical protocol without the monarch's consent shall render the birth unrecognized until proven by legal or genetic verification." Unrecognized. That's the legal word. And that's the word Ella allegedly wrote in the margin of her affidavit, next to Archie's name. Which raises a terrifying possibility. If Archie's birth didn't follow legal protocol, if it wasn't properly documented, if the necessary medical witnesses were intentionally excluded, then his status as a royal is not legally ratified. And now King Charles knows it. But what can he do? Stripping a child of titles is more than a public scandal. It's a constitutional landmine. It requires legal basis, parliamentary involvement, and, if genetics are disputed, a full paternity audit. That has never happened in modern royal history. Until now, no one dared whisper it. But Charles, under increasing pressure from legal advisors and Commonwealth ministers, is reportedly weighing his options. Because this isn't just about Archie anymore. It's about Lilibet. It's about inheritance. And it's about the line of succession. So how did Meghan respond? In short, she didn't. Instead, she doubled down on privacy. Her team, as reported by two Montecito insiders, initiated a digital lockdown. All medical records sealed. All assistants made to re-sign NDAs. A new legal firm hired to review historical maternal events and identify potential defamation vectors. That phrase, historical maternal events, has become a quiet obsession inside the palace, because it implies revisionism, sanitization, and potentially fabrication. Let's pivot, because while Ella's silence grew, another source broke ranks. A tech contractor hired to assist with digital backups at Frogmore Cottage in early 2019. He was tasked with helping secure Meghan and Harry's home devices. During a routine transfer, he claims to have seen a folder labeled Pregnancy Simulation Assets on a private iCloud account connected to Meghan's assistant. Inside were files with unusual names. Bump_stage 3_final. Cradle_pose practice. Stomach rig adjustments.mp4. Hospital walkthrough_1 take only. At first, he assumed it was related to a film project. But when he asked, he was allegedly told, "That's not for you. Forget you saw it." He didn't. He made a copy. That copy is now in the hands of a palace cybersecurity consultant. And if verified, it would suggest one thing. The visual presentation of Meghan's pregnancy was partially, if not entirely, fabricated. But it gets worse. Because one of those video files, hospital walkthrough_1 take only, shows a woman resembling Meghan walking through what appears to be a staged hospital corridor, wearing a prosthetic belly. We are told the audio includes a voice off camera saying, "Don't stop. This has to look like surveillance." Let that sink in. A staged surveillance video of a pregnant woman in a hospital, designed to appear leaked. So what were they trying to achieve? A preemptive strike against doubters? A record to confuse timelines? Or simply optics, a safety net in case scrutiny ever got too close? Whatever the motive, it suggests deep, methodical manipulation. But even with these revelations, the palace remains cautious. Because unless a whistleblower comes forward fully, unless documents are verified under oath, unless a DNA request is formally accepted, all of this remains in a legal limbo. But one thing is no longer in limbo: King Charles's resolve. He is said to have told a close aide, "The crown cannot afford fiction. Not now. Not with what's at stake." And the implications are devastating. If Meghan is found to have misled the crown, her children's titles could be suspended, her public funding privileges revoked, her standing as Duchess called into question. And for Harry, it would mean a reckoning like no other. Because one of the contingency scenarios being discussed involves a paternity ruling, and a sealed file exists inside the royal archives labeled Lineage Verification, Emergency Protocol 9. That protocol requires a full legal review of bloodline documentation and contains the signature of someone we haven't mentioned yet, Princess Anne. Why would Anne, the king's sister, sign off on a lineage audit? Because she saw something in 2019, something during a private meeting with Meghan. And now, for the first time, that story is about to come out. What did Princess Anne see in that private room? And why did she walk out white as a sheet, refusing to speak for the rest of the afternoon? Because, according to a senior courtier, whatever happened between Anne and Meghan behind closed doors at Frogmore in late April 2019 shook the Princess Royal in a way few events ever have. And, known for her composure, her stiff upper lip, her absolute loyalty to protocol, left without saying a word to the waiting staff. No parting comment. No tea. No goodbye. Just a cold, stunned silence and a brief mutter to her aide. "We've got a problem. A very big problem." That moment, until now, has been kept tightly under wraps. But a newly surfaced log entry in Anne's private royal diary, discovered by palace archivists during preparations for her Platinum Jubilee interview series, refers to a most troubling encounter with H&M, childbearing and succession assumptions. That phrase, succession assumptions, was underlined twice in red ink. Let that hang for a second. And had visited Meghan just days before Archie's reported birth. The official story was that she came bearing gifts, excited to meet the soon-to-be mother. But internal communications reveal she had a secondary agenda, authorized by Queen Elizabeth herself, to confirm Meghan's pregnancy firsthand. That's not standard. No other royal wife was ever subject to such a private verification visit. Not Kate, not Sophie, not even Diana. So why Meghan? Because by April 2019, whispers were circulating within the senior household. The Queen, sharp and detail-obsessed until the very end, had heard just enough rumors to raise her eyebrows. The changing bump size, the evasive scheduling, the refusal to allow royal midwives or palace photographers near Meghan in any candid capacity. Something wasn't right. So Anne was sent, not as an enforcer, but as a sister-in-law. An olive branch. Someone known to be blunt, yes, but also deeply loyal. But when she arrived, what she saw disturbed her. According to two sources with knowledge of Anne's private account, the Duchess of Sussex wore an ill-fitting robe, loosely tied, and positioned herself behind a coffee table for the entire visit. She allegedly did not stand to greet, and did not offer a full-profile view of her stomach. And most strangely, she kept adjusting something beneath the robe. And, ever the horsewoman and athlete, notices posture. She notices gait. She notices physical realism. And according to her, what she saw didn't add up. There were no signs of strain, no fatigue, no shifting of weight, and at one point, Meghan reportedly lifted her legs slightly to reposition on the sofa, and the curve of her belly barely shifted. It was static, rigid, suspicious, and later described it to a close friend as, like watching someone wearing a costume. All of it was hollow, performance, but rather than accuse, and attempted to probe gently. She asked about due dates, birthing plans, the role of royal medical staff. She mentioned Dr. R by name. She offered to bring him in for a short consultation, and that's when the room turned ice cold. Meghan, according to Anne's handwritten notes, allegedly replied, "Oh, I've already made other arrangements. You know, more California style," and pressed further, "You mean a home birth?" Meghan smiled, then said something that chilled in. "Not everyone gives birth the same way anymore, princess. Some of us like to keep things flexible." Flexible. In the context of royal succession, that word is terrifying. Because succession isn't flexible. It's rigid, legal, bound by constitutional precedent and centuries of law. And that's when Anne knew something was terribly wrong. She reportedly stood up without finishing her tea and walked straight out of the cottage. Her bodyguard recalls her saying, in the car, "It's not real. None of it is real, and we'll all pay the price for this." Hours later, Anne contacted the Queen's private secretary and requested an emergency classification of Meghan's pregnancy under succession contingency oversight. She didn't accuse. She didn't declare fraud, but she formally requested a review. That review was denied. Why? Because Harry intervened. Within 24 hours of Anne's visit, Prince Harry allegedly confronted Charles and threatened to pull out of all royal appearances if this witch hunt continued. He reportedly accused Anne of harassing Meghan and warned that if the family kept pushing, "We'll leave, and we'll take the baby with us." The Queen, reluctant to escalate a family feud in public, ordered the matter shelved. But Anne didn't forget. She began logging every irregularity she witnessed from that point on. The late-night travel, the secrecy around Frogmore, the missing birth documents, the lack of midwife involvement. She even noted that she never once saw Archie in person during the first 3 months of his life. He was always sleeping, she wrote, or away, or too fussy to be passed around. It was like he was being hidden. And then came the letter, weeks before the Queen's death, and drafted a sealed missive addressed to her brother, then Prince Charles. In it, she outlined her concerns. Not as accusations, but as formal questions tied to succession legitimacy. The letter, we now know, was placed in the Queen's red box for review. And now, it's part of the active file in what the palace is calling the Crown Verification Review. And here's the most stunning part. And included a copy of a photo, a single, grainy image, snapped quietly by her security aide during her visit to Frogmore. The photo, allegedly, shows Meghan mid-laugh, turned slightly sideways. And in the moment the robe slips, the belly lifts slightly. Not downward, upward, as if attached by harness, not body. Is it definitive proof? No. But for the palace, already dealing with missing documents, unexplained flight logs, and forged medical records, it was enough to trigger full review. And now, Princess Anne has done something no one expected. She signed a declaration. A legally binding statement attesting to her first-hand experience with Meghan, her concerns regarding authenticity, and her call for biological verification of the line of succession. It's bold, it's dangerous, and it's dividing the family. Because while Charles is quietly supportive, William is furious. He allegedly told Anne, "This could destroy everything. We've waited our whole lives to protect the crown, and now this." But Anne, in her usual no-nonsense tone, replied, "We don't protect the crown by lying, William. We protect it by telling the truth, even when it's ugly. And that truth? It's now being passed to Parliament. Because before any formal investigation into titles can begin, the Crown must notify key figures in government. A small circle of ministers, the Lord Chancellor, the Prime Minister, the Privy Council. That process has begun, and a legal request has been drafted, quietly, discreetly, but with explosive implications. It's a request for DNA verification, not just of Archie, but of Lilibet, too. And the man who will be asked to submit a sample? Prince Harry. But what happens if he refuses? What happens if Prince Harry refuses to take the DNA test? Simple. The line of succession begins to unravel in real time, and the entire royal family enters uncharted constitutional territory. Because unlike gossip or media speculation, this isn't a PR issue anymore. This is a legal crisis, an institutional breakdown. And whether Harry likes it or not, the monarchy now faces a moment of reckoning that could define its future for generations. Here's where we are. A formal crown verification review is underway. Princess Anne has signed a sworn declaration. King Charles has authorized a confidential legal advisory council to oversee the matter. The Queen's own pre-mortem letters are being re-examined. The royal archives have been unlocked. Even Parliament has been made aware, albeit under secrecy orders. And now, the final move rests with one man, the Duke of Sussex. He must either cooperate and submit to biological verification, or watch as the titles of his children are suspended indefinitely pending further review. But if you think Harry is walking into that test without a fight, you're dead wrong. Because according to palace sources, Harry is livid. Not emotional, not regretful. Livid. He sees this as a betrayal, a personal assault, a targeted humiliation not only against him, but against Meghan, and more importantly, against their children. In a private call to King Charles, described by insiders as tense, agitated, and borderline explosive, Harry reportedly said, "You'll burn everything to the ground just to prove a point. You don't want proof. You want to erase them." And yet, behind the fury, there's fear. Because if Harry knew for certain that everything was legitimate, if he could easily produce clean medical records, authorized hospital documentation, photos, signatures, DNA reports, why hasn't he done it already? Instead, his team has gone into lockdown mode. Legal threats, press silencing, strategic leaks. A network of high-powered Hollywood lawyers now operating out of a private Montecito command center have reportedly been tasked with containing the monarchy's smear campaign before it spreads internationally. Containment. That's the word they're using. Not transparency. Not refutation. Not clarity. They're treating this like a wildfire of suspicion, one they can't seem to stop from spreading. And ironically, every silence only makes it louder. So what happens if Harry refuses to comply? Let's break it down. Under current succession law, there's no explicit mandate requiring DNA proof. The royal line has always operated under assumed legitimacy, a delicate trust held in place by tradition, documentation, and protocol. But when that protocol is breached, as appears to be the case with Meghan's pregnancy, the Crown reserves the right to suspend or reassess recognition until the matter is settled. Suspension doesn't mean erasure, but it does mean Archie and Lilibet's current styling as prince and princess could be formally paused. That pause would affect everything: public funds and privileges, invitations to official state events, inclusion in Commonwealth documentation, historical records, and line placement. And should that pause extend too long, or be proven with finality, removal from the line of succession becomes a real possibility. The first royal children in modern history to be disqualified. Let that sink in. And if Harry blocks that process, if he actively refuses verification, he could be brought before a private royal tribunal, an emergency legal body established by the Crown in cases of succession irregularity. It's extremely rare, but it has precedent. The last time a royal tribunal convened for this kind of issue was in the late 1800s regarding questions of legitimacy in the German royal intermarriages. The stakes were lower then. They aren't now. Because if Harry refuses and the monarchy rules that legal confirmation is essential, it could lead to temporary revocation of all privileges for himself, his children, and even, potentially, Meghan. There's another layer here. Remember the Queen's letter? According to a former aide, Queen Elizabeth II wrote a sealed addendum to her 2021 succession review, placed into her red box to be opened by her successor only if the legitimacy of any heir came under question. It was marked, "For the preservation of trust and the future of the Crown." And one clause stands out. Should clarity of parentage be questioned and traditional procedure be absent, it is the sovereign's duty to request verification before granting titles of succession. Charles is following that directive now. So what does Harry do? Does he comply? Privately take the test, clear it, and put everything to rest? Or does he fight? According to royal insiders, Meghan has made her stance clear: absolutely not. She reportedly told a legal confidant, "I won't let them turn our family into a paternity test sideshow. I carried those children. That's the end of it." But that's not the end of it. Because multiple former staffers have already submitted statements indicating they were asked to leave the room during critical prenatal moments. No sonograms were ever shown. No prenatal documents were ever placed into the royal archives. Even the royal photographer assigned to document the early days of the pregnancy was given zero access. None of this is normal. And in this climate of silence and stonewalling, the palace has received growing support internally for full enforcement of emergency protocol. One source close to the Lord Chamberlain said, "It's not about vengeance. It's about closure. If everything's fine, a simple verification ends it. But every refusal fuels the fire. We can't ignore the fire anymore. And the fire's spreading. Media outlets are beginning to whisper again. Influential Commonwealth figures are quietly asking for clarification. Even private aristocratic circles are drawing lines, some already refusing to use Archie and Lilibet's royal styling at formal functions. The children, whether guilty of anything or not, are becoming lightning rods for legitimacy. And here's where it all turns even darker. Because the palace has one more card. One final option that no one has dared mention publicly. A royal guardian clause. Buried deep in the legal bylaws of crown succession, allows the sovereign, in the case of ongoing legal ambiguity, to assume custodial oversight of any royal child born within the line of succession, if that child's legal or biological legitimacy is in question. It's never been used. Not once. But it exists. And a legal memo has reportedly been drafted outlining conditions under which King Charles could assume temporary legal guardianship of Archie and Lilibet. Not to take them physically, but to suspend Meghan and Harry's legal authority to speak on behalf of the children in matters of royal succession until clarity is achieved. That document sits locked in a safe inside Clarence's house, waiting, because Charles doesn't want to pull the trigger. But he might not have a choice. And Harry? He's running out of time, because someone else is about to break their silence. Someone who was inside the house. Someone who handled the swaddled baby during that first infamous photo op. Someone who now says, on record, "I never felt weight. I never saw movement. I never heard a cry." What if the person who first held baby Archie now says he might not have been real? Because that's what's happening. After 4 years of silence, a royal footman assigned to Meghan and Harry's security detail during Archie's first public appearance has come forward with a quiet but chilling revelation. He was there. He helped manage the lighting in St. George's Hall. He coordinated the positioning of press photographers. And most crucially, he was handed the swaddled infant moments before Harry and Meghan stepped into frame. And what he now claims, it didn't feel like a baby. It didn't respond. It didn't breathe. It was cold. Let that sit with you. The first public appearance of Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor, his global debut, watched by millions, may have involved a prop, a doll, a simulation of a child. And for years, that moment has raised eyebrows. But now, the man holding the bundle is finally saying aloud what many have only dared whisper. He was instructed, just before the photo was taken, "Hold him steady, keep the blanket tight, don't adjust anything." When he asked if the baby needed support for the neck, standard practice with any newborn, an aide allegedly told him, "No need. He's very calm." Very calm? According to the footman, he didn't squirm. He didn't breathe. There was no baby smell. At the time, he chalked it up to nerves. A strange day. Maybe the baby had been sedated. Maybe he was simply asleep. But over the years, as more questions surfaced, the memory began to haunt him. And when he recently saw footage of himself in that hallway, when he watched his own hands carry what should have been the royal family's newest heir, he realized something. I wasn't holding life. I was holding silence. This isn't just a conspiracy theory now. This is a first-hand account. A man who touched what the world believed to be a living newborn, and now swears under oath that he doesn't believe that baby was real. But why? Why would Harry and Meghan present a doll? Let's explore the only two possible explanations, neither of which are comforting. Option 1. The real baby was elsewhere. Maybe Archie existed, but for whatever reason, health, logistics, secrecy, the Sussexes chose not to present him at the time. Maybe the real baby was born days earlier or later. Maybe they weren't ready. Maybe they felt the pressure to perform and couldn't meet the demand. So they faked it. They wrapped a weighted doll and stepped into a photo op designed purely for optics. A 5-minute illusion for the cameras to buy them time. But if so, why not admit that now? Why not correct the timeline, produce the hospital records, and close the book? Because they can't. Because the timelines have already calcified. The lies, if they were lies, have compounded. And unraveling them now would cause a media and legal firestorm that could end everything they've built. Option 2. The baby didn't exist yet. This is the darker version. This is the theory insiders now whisper behind cupped hands in Kensington Palace and Sandringham. That at the time of the public photo, no child had been born. That the surrogacy arrangement, if one existed, was still ongoing, and that Meghan had never carried a child at all. That the prosthetic bumps, the mysterious travel logs, the missing hospital records, the absence of any verifiable medical witness, all pointed to a constructed narrative. And that the presentation of a baby at St. George's Hall was theater, designed to lock in the timeline, designed to make the public, the monarchy, and the press believe a royal birth had happened when it hadn't. That would mean everything since then, from christenings to birthday photos, was built on an orchestrated falsehood. And remember, this footman wasn't the only one there. 2 other staffers, now retired, have also broken silence in private depositions submitted to the Crown Verification Review. One says, "I asked if I could peek at the baby, just to say hello, and Meghan gave me a look I'll never forget. Cold, like I'd just broken some unspoken law." The other describes, "Harry was fidgeting the whole time. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, and he kept adjusting the blanket, always pulling it tighter." You don't need to be a psychologist to read the signs. Something was being concealed. And now, with the palace investigation underway, the forensic analysis of the St. George's Hall photos has begun. Digital enhancement experts, commissioned quietly by the Royal Archives, are examining the high-resolution images taken that day. Preliminary findings? There are no signs of movement. No muscle shifts in Meghan's arms. No natural curvature in the blanket. One frame shows what may be an exposed plastic seam near the wrist area of the baby's left hand. And most damningly, one image shows Meghan gripping the blanket in a very specific way, with pressure concentrated not under the baby's head, but on either side of a stiff rectangular shape, as if she was bracing an object, not a child. So now the palace faces the impossible question. If that wasn't Archie, where was he? Where was the real baby? Was he even born? If not, when? Where? To whom? The Crown Verification Review is now considering multiple possible birth dates. Quiet subpoenas are being drafted to request all hospital logs between April and June 2019 at 5 UK and US medical centers believed to be connected to Meghan's network. Even American facilities are being scrutinized now. An anonymous whistleblower in California has hinted that a high-profile client with a UK background requested a private neonatal suite under pseudonym Ms. Colette, a name that appears nowhere in UK birth registries, but shares the initials of Meghan and the name of her childhood pen name, Flower Colette. Coincidence? Or breadcrumb? Here's the emotional core of this entire story. If Archie was born via surrogate, the public would have understood. The monarchy may have adapted. People support reproductive choice, especially in modern families. But this isn't about reproduction. This is about deception. It's about the deliberate attempt to present something false as royal fact, on public record, in front of cameras, sealed into history. And the worst part? That baby, the real one, if he exists, has no idea. He is growing up in a shadow of uncertainty, a pawn in a global mystery. His very identity, his royal legitimacy, is under investigation, not because of anything he did, but because of decisions made before he could even open his eyes. And the clock is ticking, because if more footage surfaces, if someone from Meghan's old Hollywood team leaks the behind-the-scenes prep, the bump fittings, the prop rehearsals, the illusion collapses entirely. And next, all eyes turn to Lilibet. Because if Archie's birth was staged, what really happened in California? What really happened in California? That's the question gripping the monarchy right now. Because if the doubts around Archie's birth have opened a gaping crack in the royal narrative, then Lilibet's origin threatens to shatter it completely. There was no hospital appearance, no photos, no statements from doctors or midwives, just a flat press release. issued remotely by Harry and Meghan's team in Santa Barbara, that Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor had been born on June 4, 2021, at 11:40 a.m. at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. But here's the twist. That hospital has no record of the birth. Let that sink in. Several investigative journalists, along with a private legal team working on behalf of a senior royal figure, submitted formal FOIA-style medical access requests to confirm the birth. The hospital's response: "We cannot confirm or deny the existence of any such record." That's standard legal protection language. But when paired with internal whistleblower statements and a suspicious absence of any hospital staff acknowledgments, congratulations, or even basic press engagement, it becomes more than suspicious. It becomes strategic silence. Compare this with the birth of Prince George in the UK. The media circus. The hospital staff lined up for press photos. Doctors releasing brief but respectful statements. Nurses acknowledging the importance of the moment. All of it transparent. With Lilibet, not a single nurse, not a single doctor, not a single midwife. No public photos. No birth certificate issued on time. No medical team stepping forward. And then, curiously, weeks later, a U.S. birth certificate did appear, submitted to California records and picked up by reporters. But something about it was wrong. Two things, actually. One, the attending physician listed has never been confirmed by Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital as even having privileges to deliver there during that window. Two, Meghan's name is listed not as Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, but as Rachel Meghan Markle, which, in itself, isn't the issue. The issue is that it doesn't match the legal styling required for royal lineage registration and was submitted weeks after the standard certification window. This wouldn't matter for a civilian, but for a royal? It's massive, because it means Lilibet's place in the line of succession hinges on a birth certificate that was submitted late, filled with irregularities, and connected to a hospital that refuses to confirm it happened. And now the palace has begun questioning if it happened at all. Let's rewind. Lilibet was born after Harry and Meghan had fully departed royal life. No longer under the direct supervision of royal physicians. No longer under the oversight of UK constitutional standards. They were in Montecito. Independent. Isolated. Protected. Too protected. Because no one, not a single senior royal, has ever laid eyes on Lilibet in person. Not even Charles. Not even William. In fact, the Queen herself was reportedly denied a video call meeting in the weeks following Lilibet's birth. Aides say a Zoom call was scheduled and then abruptly canceled. Twice. When she finally saw a photo, it was through a filtered, pre-approved digital portrait sent by Harry's assistant. She never heard the child cry. She never spoke to her. She never even saw her blink. And just before her passing, the Queen allegedly told a close aide, "I never met her. Isn't that strange? A great-granddaughter, and I've never heard her voice." It's more than strange. It's unprecedented. Which brings us to the surrogacy question. There are now growing whispers, inside legal circles, medical forums, and even the House of Lords, that Lilibet, too, may have been born via gestational carrier. Not because of shame, not because of controversy, but because Meghan wanted control. Because Meghan, according to sources close to her former PR team, had begun crafting the Lilibet narrative months in advance. She reportedly told a branding consultant in early 2021, "This baby will be different. She's our American princess. We do this our way, not theirs." Our way. That meant no doctors, unless handpicked. No photos, unless stylized. No hospital, unless media-proof. And it meant creating a birth story so tightly controlled, no one could ever verify it. Until now. Because something slipped. A former Montecito estate employee, recently laid off in a round of quiet staff terminations, has provided testimony to a UK legal firm working under the Crown Verification Review. She claims to have assisted a woman named Tina during her stay at a guest house on the Sussex property in the final days of May 2021. Tina, she says, was visibly pregnant, heavily so, and rarely left her room. When asked, staff were told she was a cousin visiting from out of state. But here's the twist. After Lilibet's reported birth, Tina vanished. No forwarding address. No departure records. No mail. And a staff-wide NDA was reissued 3 days later, signed under penalty of civil suit. What was being covered? Another former staffer claimed to have seen medical equipment being wheeled into the guest house from a side entrance at night. Not during the day. At night. No ambulance. No official hospital trip. Just a quiet, internal operation. And days later, boom. Press release. Baby born. All is well. But there's no birth photo. No crying baby. No confirmation from the alleged hospital. And the same staffer claims that what was seen in the days following were boxes of formula, breast pumps, and carefully couriered packages marked human milk, expressed. That's not unusual for a mother who can't breastfeed. But when no one had ever seen Meghan pregnant in those final weeks, it raises one colossal question. Did she ever carry Lilibet? There's another layer to this, one that has turned a once quiet whisper into a roaring behind-the-scenes investigation. Meghan's old friend, a Hollywood stylist who briefly fell out of favor with her in 2022, has allegedly shared screenshots of a conversation where Meghan jokes about having a designer pregnancy body for the press and no baby weight to lose. The date? June 10, 2021. 6 days after Lilibet's reported birth. No baby weight. If this screenshot is authenticated, it could be the smoking gun. Because even as the public was told Meghan had just given birth, she was allegedly joking about keeping her figure pristine. And now, that same stylist is being subpoenaed. Her phone is being reviewed. Her backups retrieved. Because if those messages are real, it could mean Meghan Markle faked not just one pregnancy, but two. And that kind of deception, if proven, wouldn't just rock the monarchy. It would force the palace to remove both children from the line of succession. But even more terrifying, it could open the door for criminal charges. Fraud, false representation, misuse of royal titles. Because while the UK may forgive eccentricity, it does not forgive threats to constitutional integrity. And Charles knows it, which is why, as of last week, the royal household has initiated Phase 2 of the Crown Verification Review. This phase includes formal requests for U.S. court cooperation in obtaining verification of birth locations, legal surrogacy arrangements, and parental rights transfers. And what happens if the U.S. pushes back? What happens if Meghan and Harry fight tooth and nail to block it? Then the palace goes nuclear. Because sitting inside a locked drawer at Balmoral is one final document. A contingency letter from Queen Elizabeth II, signed in 2021, entitled simply, "In the event of irrevocable breach."